All three members of the, and I need to pull up the title, Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, have resigned suddenly all at once. We'll talk about why that happened. We'll talk about what was the purpose of this commission, and we'll also cover some of their recent reports. Welcome to the reality show. I should also remind people that today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. More about it later in the video. Joining me today are Marco Richard and Jar Reichel. Thank you guys for joining me today. And I guess I'll jump to you, Jar, immediately. So I think we can just say it. Most likely the reason, everybody put a different reason for resigning. Some of them were too old and everything, but I think the sanction on what's her name, Francesca Albanese, most likely inspired their resignation. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the UN is a special place in regard to the fact that you can do whatever you want without like caring for the consequences. Criminal states get a seat, they can vote. Russia and China has a veto right in the Security Council, which is the only part of the UN that actually matters for anything. And they can have dictators voting for human rights, and you can have a special community to scrutinize Israel and to lie and to just use diplomatic antisemitism and bear no consequences. So I think Trump applying those sanctions against Francesca is an indication that this era might come to an end. And if you ask me, I think the UN should be drastically reformed or even reestablished as a different entity that is focused on countries that protects rights. Then only those countries can have a legitimate voice in such world coordination organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So Alvarito in the chat says they sanctioned Albanese. Yeah, we've actually covered that on the show, so people can look that up. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or the day before. But yeah, she is sanctioned, and it most likely inspired also these people to resign prematurely as well. Marco, any opening thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, the UN is a pointless organization, really. It was created after the Second World War with this kind of morality behind, this kind of Christian altruism, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek. So the assumption was that you can sit around the table and talk to your enemies. Well, this is totally wrong on a moral point of view, and even we've seen it in action that this is not possible. You cannot deal with somebody who wants your death, and we tried over and over again, and we see it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the whole idea behind is flawed in the first place. But yeah, I mean, the UN has never done anything useful for human flourishing. It's never done anything good for anyone. Bear in mind, the UN is the body that brought to you the net zero, the climate panic crap. So they are effectively causing us to enjoy a lesser level of quality of life. We're seeing it every day because of the net zero pushed by the UN. They are the people who brought out the lockdown again. About to sniffle does the rounds. So we lock down everything, we destroy economies, and everybody suffer out of it. That's again thanks to the UN. And of course, we see even the military intervention that is marketed as a good thing. The world coming to keep peace. Well, we see what UNIFIL did. They were supposed to keep peace in Lebanon. They actually took part to the atrocities of Hezbollah. We've seen what UNRWA is doing under the supposed motive of feeding the Palestinians. They actually harmed Hamas, and they're still protected them. They provided resources, they provided shelter, they provided all sorts of stuff to Hamas in order to attack Israel. So, The UN is the big mothership of altruism and statism and collectivism. So really ought to be destroyed.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, for my part, these three are leaving for their assorted bag of pretend reasons, and it's good riddance to irrelevant rubbish, isn't it? But of course, it's also hello to another bunch of anti-Semitic replacements, no doubt, who are because it's not like the body itself is being discontinued. It's not like the kind of work they do is being discontinued. So it's just this particular bunch of post holders are leaving the stage, and some new group of influencers and those looking for notoriety and claps on the back and all expenses paid trips around the world paid for by theocracies and those that support them, particularly the kind of Iran, for example. All of that, they're going to be the in crowd now once more. So if it's not the body itself that's terminated, if it's not the actual presence of this particular group within this organization that's ended, then we haven't actually, it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, quite honestly, isn't it? And you can keep sanctioning every single post holder who takes up, posts on this committee or any other similarly named committee, and you won't achieve anything, not so long as you endorse the UN by remaining a member of it. And that is the ultimate sanction that you're giving it by giving it the phony legitimacy of your presence, which ultimately makes it look as if you endorse everything it does and that it does represent the whole world, which it absolutely doesn't. It represents the lowest common denominator. I think in terms of I don't think it could be reformed. I think it's flawed at concept, as Marco mentioned there, and I think you would need a body that had within its name the core elements of what it represented, like the individual freedom, for example, the individual rights would need to be part of the name of the body. It can't just be a generic name that very quickly becomes everything from theocracies to dictatorships to every variant of hideous run country across the world with the wrong kind of ideology that doesn't represent what is really going to make humans flourish no matter where they live. So it's better that it's smaller and more representative of what the future should have as part of it than it stays big and broad, flabby, and of course always anti-Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something to point out about again, sort of reforming the UN. Again, it's an organization that includes every single dictatorship on earth, and most of the members of the UN are authoritarian nations, are dictatorships. What kind of reform? The only kind of reform that can happen is towards those dictatorship. How can you enforce minority to do anything, especially as like Yar mentioned, China and Russia have the seat at the Security Council, which again was originally the Soviet Union, and the seat was then given to the Communist China from the Nationalist China, or what is now Taiwan. Something Jan mentioned is sort of that the UN Security Council is the only part that matters. I want to like do somewhat of a comment on this because yeah, when it comes to like actually doing something, meaning the like UNIFIL or something or some forces, UN forces go somewhere, yeah, that requires sort of the Security Council. But I think there is a much worse part, and it's the sanction part of the UN, is the fact that UN is viewed as this objective international body that is the sort of has the truth. It's the one that is actually speaking about it. And so I want to go also into the sort of what this commission actually did in the past and sort of why it's problematic. But I also like to apologize. I actually didn't read the whole title of the commission because it's actually Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, which I thing is kind of weird title because it assumes all of Israel is an occupied Palestinian territory, unless my English grammar is not correct and it doesn't, but it kind of seems to imply that. So I'll bring up uh, I mean, I'll bring up just one comment they did from basically the purpose of these commissions, they are set up to do something, and then every year they report to the either UN itself or the Human Rights Council. And so in 2022, they reported the continued occupation by Israel of Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and the discrimination against Palestinians are the main underlying root causes of the recurrent tensions, instability, and protraction of conflict in the region. To understand what it means is basically, as long as Israel is here, that's the problem. The problem is Israeli so-called occupation of the what I guess they would call the West Bank, but is Judea and Samaria. I mean, any comments? Just by the way, this is supposed to be like an independent so-called inquiry that is reporting on both sides. Basically, it's also supposed to report on the Palestinian violations.
This is a political arm of the Palestinian movement to destroy Israel. As I talked about in previous shows, Palestinism is basically an ideology and a political movement, originally mostly Arab people who want Israel destroyed, but now there are pro-Palestinians who around the world who are part of Palestinism, who are using the situation in Israel in an attempt to create some diplomatic effort to destroy Israel. So this is just one of their branches. It's one of their most executive figures, not in the movement itself, but in worldwide organizations. And they're serving their goal. They're basically a propaganda arm, as you said, Daniel. They're using the UN unjustified legitimacy around the world to spread lies and propaganda against Israel and to portray it as a villain, which is absolutely ridiculous and basically against the facts of reality and any common sense. I think the only reason it's worth wasting my time in talking about them is because, as you said, Daniel, people around the world actually see them as something serious, and that's just, I don't know, it's completely absurd, and the sooner this body ceases to exist, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to go to you, Marco, I can mention one more thing from the from this commission. They were interviewed by Al Jazeera at some point, and commenting on what has been happening in Gaza. They've said they've never seen anything like this. And, of course, war is tough. War is not pretty to look at. But calling what's happening in Gaza is like the worst thing that's happening right now, when there are actual genocides going out around the world, when there are actual sort of I mean, I cannot come up with something worse than genocide. Like, actual genocides are happening in the world, and they go to Gaza and say, okay, this is what we have to care for. This is actually the worst thing that's happening.
Well, it's part of the propaganda that the UN is being used for, isn't it? Because frankly, I mean, I've never seen anything like October 7th since the Holocaust in the 40s, during the Second War and before the Second War. So, you can select what you like and comment on what you like, and then, but the problem that what ER was talking about, that people see the UN as a serious organization, not only as a serious organization, but as a good organization. People assume that what comes from the UN is the standard of morality in our days. And in a sense, it is, because, as I said earlier on, it's a collectivist totalitarian organization. They promote over national government. They propose same governments all over the place, whether you're a civilized country or you are a bunch of savages like most of the people that we are talking about. So the fact that they've been taken over by these Marxist Islamic or Islamic Marxist, pick your poison, ideology, especially in the last 20, 30, 40 years, it's part of the problem. That the whole organization in its various guises, and there are hundreds of thousands of different agencies and bodies. The human rights bit of the UN itself is split into God knows how many dozens of different areas, each of which have got some members of staff touch it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of employees. I mean, probably if you included every single bits and bob attached to the UN, it's millions of people working for them, and they're all attached to the diplomatic corps, if you like, because it's the least accountable of the areas of our societies, really. Everybody sees diplomacy as a good thing. Well, it is not when you're dealing with terrorists. It is not when you sit at the table and you allow Iran to have a role in the human rights sector. I mean, Iran hasn't got human rights. Iran kills women for not wearing the scarf, the Islamic garb that they're forced to wear. But, we worry about what happened in Gaza because, of course, Israel has to be the bad guy, isn't it? It's been designed to be the bad guy. Never mind that Israel itself was created by the UN, but that's just details that get in the way of reality. So,
and when did you last hear a report from the UN about the scourge of Islamism or the scourge of communism on the lives of people across the globe? You don't hear those reports because that isn't their enemy. That is, part of what identifies some of their core tenets, really, because it represents so many of their the makeup of the overall body. And I think it's important to as you said earlier, to know what they don't talk about, the extent to which they don't talk about what goes on in North Korea or even the Uyghurs within China, for example, or within Myanmar. Or any of the trouble spots across the world. There's a lack of emphasis on it, and I think once you look at the two things that make up any given body and its how to analyze it, how to assess it. One is what it stands for, what its sort of ideology is, what its makeup is, what its MO is, and also is who leads it as well. And Antonio Gutierrez is the very representation of the same kind of mentality we're talking about. Because surely everything that he said in terms of whether it's referring to October the 7th or whether it's referring to Gaza since, it's been the same kind of anti-Semitic tropes being used all the time, isn't it? So the essence of the organization is set from the top, and it's set by what it actually stands for itself. I do slightly want to challenge the notion that the sanctions have worked, because I think that's a bit of a bogus conclusion to draw in terms of that's what's forced these people to give up their posts, because I mean they've given it up through self-preservation and cowardice, knowing full well that somebody else will take their place, and I don't think that sanctions work when you're issuing sanctions on a rather irrational, whim-based basis. And at the moment, the way in which the US and a US led by Trump is throwing out sanctions or the threat of sanctions, whether that's to a Rosie O'Donnell or to an Elon Musk or to anybody you've got a personal vendetta against, as well as legitimate people for sanctioning such as these, then the notion that you're doing it from the right motives is destroyed, isn't it? You can't tell which are the right motives and which are just, you're not in my clique, I dislike you, you're not in my club. So it's what should be sanctioned is the entire body itself, and the only way to sanction it is by withdrawing from it. And of course, so long as there is a UN headquarters in New York, and so long as the US supports it to the extent that it does, and particularly the US, because so many other countries follow where the US leads, then a sanction is a phony piece of paper, quite honestly. And the fact that we cheer for the fact that Albanese has been given a public slap, a metaphorical public slap, is it may be satisfying in the sense that you're seeing her brought down a peg or two, but that's where it begins and ends, and that is insufficient to actually move on and achieve something that is lasting and meaningful.
I'd like to add on that. I agree with what you said. I just want to put an emphasis on the fact that while the US administration is implementing those sanctions and against individuals within those communities, it's still, and I'd like to put an emphasis that the US administration, and it always have been, giving a moral sanction and approval to the UN and to the mechanism and to the way it's worked. And basically, the implicit statement is, okay, we support the UN and it's good to have all of these committees and everything, but those people running them, they're corrupted and we need other people to do it right. And that's complete, like, just wrong. And as you said, the United States of America with one document, with one executive order or a decision that the technicalities doesn't matter. It will be very easy to just say, we no longer allocate budget to the UN. We no longer host North Korea in New York and allow them to have offices in New York, and all of those dictatorships, we kick them all out. We evoke those visas and just causing this organization not to exist anymore and starting something new that is built off countries who are respecting individual rights. And they will set the tone on what's going on in the world. And they will decide which country is legitimate and which country is criminal based on objective criteria of individual rights. And then we'll see all of those dictatorships crumbling, stop getting humanitarian aid, those regimes just falling apart, and an opportunity to establish proper constitutions around the world to protect individual rights. But at the intellectual state of today's world, this is not possible. Until people will not understand those ideas, there will be no demand for such action. People are now giving moral sanctions to evil. So we have a lot of way to do that. And by the way, this is the reason why the UN is so focused against Israel, because Israel is the biggest intellectual threat to evil, because Israel sets the example of people who are persecuted and went and just says, okay, we're going to take this piece of land and make sure people in this piece of land have individual rights. And it worked. And it worked even though they're surrounded by barbarians. So all of the materialistic, altruistic, evil premises those intellectuals are promoting are just, Israel is just a striking example. It's all BS. So they must use all their energy to rationalize why Israel is actually evil and is actually an oppressor, a thief, whatever, so they can justify their evil ideology, while Israel is a striking example that their ideology is BS and basically destroying the West. So Israel is one of the biggest intellectual defenders of the Western world in practice by their existence and by their qualities and by the situation in Israel. So I think the focus against Israel in the UN and within intellectuals in the Western world, mostly the left, is an indication for those intellectuals actively fighting to destroy the West rather than anything else.
Yeah, somebody in the chat says, where was it? It was, and now I, of course, cannot. Oh, here it is. John Mshimer, the world-renowned US Jewish political scientist, best-selling books, etc., said Zionism is like Nazism. Well, if you want to hear more from John Mshimer, or specifically not hear more from him, but from us commenting on him, you can look up the video we did on him about 5 months ago. Simply put in John Mshimer, Ayn Rand Center UK into the YouTube, and I also post the link to that in the chat so people can look this up after this stream. And before I move over, let me also remind people that today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by the Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. If you are interested in science, objectivism, both or neither, I think this is a great resource to find out more about science through sort of like an objectivist lens, or from an actual objectivist and from an actual scientist. So a new book from Zoltan Sendes. You can check it out on Amazon, The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. If you are a YouTube member, you can also look up the interview we did with him earlier this month. It's on our YouTube channel if you are a member. So again, check out The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy on Amazon. So yeah, moving on, I want to bring up one more report, and then we can move on to some other things. So they've recently released a report. This commission had a report of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. You can look it up. They've released this on September 11th, 2024. I'm sure it was not an accident. I'm sure it was an accidental date to pick to release this. In that, you can find many great gems such as, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, when they are actually quoting Hamas for their information. Of course, in reports on both sides, it's point by point, and starts with point 1, where it's about Israel, goes until point 73 to talk about Israel, and then it starts talking about Palestinians, where it goes on for about 16 points. So yeah, this is the kind of, of course, when you are judging a conflict, it's not like you're gonna have 50 things on one side and 50 things on the other. Of course, there's gonna be one more on one side. But I wouldn't expect the country that actually has some respect for individual rights to be as the one that is the problematic one in this situation. Then it also has recommendations to take, where I think it has about something like 20 recommendations for Israel and 4 recommendations for Palestinians, since we know so-called Palestine is only 4 changes in policy from actually being the freest country in the world. Sorry for that.
I'd like to remind you all what is Palestine in the context we're talking about. So Palestine today as an entity, as a state, and by state I mean basically they have a geographic region they are practically ruling. Is basically there are 2 kinds of those states. There is the Palestinian state in Gaza, which we all know what is that. It's basically a bunch of the worst dictators and murderers and thieves and rapists and liars and evil scumbags basically in history. And we have the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, what they call the West Bank, which is a bunch of towns and cities that are ruled by Abu Mazen and Mahmoud Abbas. And as I mentioned in previous show, I'll remind you again, if somebody sold land to a Jew, he will be tried and to death punishment. If somebody is suspected by the mob of somehow cooperating with Israel, he's likely to be lynched, and there will be no repercussions, and obviously the Palestinian police will not do anything for the lynchers. And terrorists who murdered Israelis, Palestinian terrorists, by Palestinian I mean Palestineism, so do like Muslims, Arabs, who murdered Israel are immediately being recognized as Palestinians who fought against the Israelis and get a salary from the Palestinian authorities. And if they were killed in action, their families will give the salary. And Palestinians officers, and I remind you, they work supposedly in coordination with Israel, the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. They get money from Israel. Israel helps them collect tax money. And their officers, who also are being armed with the approval of Israel, and sometimes even Israel is the arms supplier for them, are going and making terror attacks against Israel. And a few days ago, they killed an Israeli citizen Palestinian police officers, and by the way, they get their qualifications at Qatar, very surprisingly. And some of you might ask, well, I said it in the context of the UN, like only giving for comments on the Palestinians, but in the broader context, like there is a question here, like why is Israel helping the Palestinian Authority? And the reason is that Israel is still, unfortunately, giving moral sanction to those who want to destroy to Palestineism. And there is a lot of dirty politics around it, and a lot of international pressure, and there will be there is a price to stopping with Israel supporting the Palestinian Authority. That's all true, but it does not justify the fact that Israel is still basically helping the Palestinians to destroy it. So it's something that is very important to clarify, and it's been going on since the 90s.
Absolutely. And yeah, the sanction of the UN has to be withdrawn. And we've seen Netanyahu still tries to claim to it. He spoke at the UN, I think it was some time ago at this point. But when he did speak, almost everybody actually left the room and didn't even listen to him. And then he spoke about friendly alliances with the people who left the room and were not even caring to actually hear what he has to say. So yeah, that sanction absolutely has to be withdrawn. I think, yeah, I think you mentioned earlier that it should be easy to stop. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, because that's the proper way, Congress in the US would have to both pass a law to either leave the UN or stop sending money to the UN. I think it happened in the past, but should absolutely do so, even if it takes another 1 or 2 steps, and kick them out of New York. Again, it absolutely has no place to be there. Marco, any more thoughts from you?
Well, again, the content of the report is not surprising at all, is it? Because the people that work for the UN are the very people who are sharing the kind of culture that the UN represents. They share hate for civilization, hate for progress, hate for human flourishing, and they show it by choosing to quote facts by the very people who caused October the 7th. The terrorist organization Hamas cannot be used as a piece of data to be included in any report. Apart from condemning them and trying to cause their downfall, you shouldn't do anything else with Hamas. Hamas has to be destroyed, full stop, because they represent evil. And of course, the UN as a whole is hating Israel because they haven't got any interest at all in showing that a free country is a better country, is a freer, is a happier country, is a wealthier country, is a more productive country than a country that lives under the yoke of tyranny, whatever the nature of this tyranny, whether it's theocracy or absolute monarchy or whatever that is. So you will never find the UN report on relationship between individual freedom and richness, wealth, and happiness of people. The UN will never push for the kind of tin pot shitholes that actually makes it up to reach the standard of the higher countries, to get rid of the kind of corruption which is just thrive not only among the countries that make up the UN, but also among the various officials in the UN. Because if you start looking at it, you will see that there are many officials which have actually been indicted for being corrupt. We had somebody here, a judge of one of the courts in the UN, for example, here in Britain, that was keeping slaves. I mean, that's the kind of people you're dealing with. You're dealing with an organization which is so vast and unaccountable, and which is so against civilization and progress that even things probably they even think themselves working there they're actually doing something good while feathering their own nest at our expenses. Because yes, it might be a governmental serious organizations, but the money comes from our government. It's implementation of the Marxist from everyone according to the ability to everyone according to their needs. The people with needs are lots of them, and the people with ability are fewer and fewer, but they had to be squeezed like lemon in order to allow this sort of altruistic anti-progress machine to thrive. And frankly, I don't see the need to reform the UN, because I don't see the need to replace it with anything new either. Two free countries, two countries whose interest is to protect the individual rights of their own citizen, can choose to collaborate freely. They don't need a supernatural, super governmental organization. You don't need another level of bureaucracy above what you already have. Collaboration among free people, it's optional and desirable. If you're free people trying to make your people and keep them free, well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
For me, one of the best.
I'd like to add. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Please go ahead, Ayn.
Yeah, so I'd like to add on Daniel's point. The president of the United States cannot have an executive order saying, "Hey, I'm leaving the UN." He has to get the approval of the Congress. But the president can suspend funding or at least delay them to the UN via executive orders. He can basically veto every resolution in the Security Council to make it ineffective. He can deny visas to dictators currently living, the representatives currently living in New York City under defense for being a part of the UN. So you have North Korea and Turkmenistan and whatever dictatorships just chilling, the representative just living next to the UN in New York. And those things will not happen, though, because of the current view of the public in the United States and around the world, as mentioned, giving more sanction to the UN and seeing it as a legitimate authority. Therefore, my recommendations for whatever US president want to actually do something about it is, first of all, withdrawal from UNESCO, World Health Organization, all of these voluntary parts of the UN. And
just quickly, I think the funding to the UNESCO is actually, I'm not sure if it's still paused, but was originally paused because Palestinian territories entered UNESCO.
Exactly. And the second thing a US president should do and can do very easily is launch a campaign against the UN. Just say, this is bad for those reasons, A, B, C, D, as we mentioned here many times, and say the US should bail, and then just talk to the people, tell them the truth. And then an organic demand will rise.
Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the better moments in the past couple of years was pitifully brief, but it was still, it showed what might be possible, which was the defunding of UNRWA being led by the US. And so far as I know, they still defund it in the US, but many other countries have gone back to funding it. And that which speaks to the fact that you cannot simply have one country doing the right thing and everybody else following along, because the culture of altruism is so endemically sucked up and so endemically agreed to by so many, that sacrificing your best ideals for the lousiest ideals of your enemy is so written into how people think that they are prepared to fund the teaching of people who are going to kill you, which is what UNRWA essentially was. But it did show that it is possible, and the only thing that actually seemed to have some surprise to it and some actual clout was in that period when UNRWA's existence was truly threatened by having its funding severed. And that is that it's not about money, it's about the sanction. The money is representative of the sanction. It's not in place of it. I think there's so much moral equivalency within the UN, and of course there's moral equivalency at every stage, isn't there? Between comparing hostages to criminal prisoners in exchanges. It's just another example of the same problem. how are we going to move on from this so long as the UN continues to exist? I don't think we can. And I don't think we can until, as EL pointed out so eloquently, with his standout point about why we support Israel and why Israel stands in the face of the UN, because it's what it represents. And that's the whole reason that this channel and us and the many conversations we've had here supports Israel is because of of the principles that it's standing up for. Not because of any religious basis. It's not because of any Jewish basis. It's because of the principles of individual rights and of allowing people to actually live their lives and to protect them from external threat to living their individual lives. That's what Israel represents, and that's what stands in the face of what the UN stands for. I think if you look at the title of even this particular body we're talking about, where these three people have quit, never mind the second half of it, which we've covered about occupied Palestinian territories, etc. But look at the first part of it. You've got International Independent Commission of Inquiry. Unpick those words one at a time. International, because it's the majority, it's got to be right because it's international. International is better than single country. Well, not if international represents the lowest common denominator, it's not. Independent is a joke, isn't it? That implies objectivity and unbiased analysis, and it's not. It's a blatant lie. Commission, I mean, commission gives it a sort of, a body, the prestige of an official body, which, again, if the body itself is illegitimate and its principles of existence are phony, then the word commission doesn't mean anything. It's not giving it any kind of authority that it's claimed to have. An inquiry is just looking into it. It's just asking questions, isn't it? But it isn't asking questions, is it? It's making propaganda, and that's what each and every report is. And you only got to look at any one of them to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. You sort of reminded me of one quote, and I'm now not even sure where it's from. It could be either from one game, yes, Minister, or from Ayn Rand. No, I'm not sure, but it's something. When two people are too cowardly or stupid to make a decision, they create a committee. And this is exactly what this speaks about. It's, yeah, basically, we create this commission to look into stuff, and they are supposed to simply report. But again, people like this report shouldn't really mean anything. It's simply should go to the UN Human Rights Council and just say, okay, this is what we have. But people use this. People continuously, like once a report is made, they'll quote it. Again, even when you go into this report itself, it's simply quoting other people. It's quoting UN itself. If you go to it, it's like WHO, it's Gaza Health Ministry. It's simply like this cycle of basically UN quoting Hamas and pro-Hamas propagandists then quoting the UN. It's a cycle that goes on. And unless you understand what every single organization does, you don't see it. But this is exactly how it works. So. Yeah, I know you had some points you wanted to bring up. So, yeah, unless you want to say something more about the UN story, you can.
Yeah, so I have a lot of things I wanted to talk about today, but I'll be short. First of all, I'd like to give you an update on the situation in Iran. So just a quick, to wrap up what we did in Iran in June 13th to 24th. So Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, or in Hebrew, Am Kelavi. It was a great military success, yet once again, where it comes to diplomacy, Israel, it makes Israel never finish the job, unfortunately, and this time it was like a Israeli-US deal to stop the war with Iran and move to diplomacy. But until that point, we have managed to basically kill 30 senior Iranian Revolution Guard commanders. So 30 of their most executive officers are gone. We crippled their ballistic arsenal, destroyed over 60% of all their launchers and over 1,000 of their missiles. and also many of their missiles that they've launched are also gone, and most of them have been shot down in the air. And we have air supremacy in Iran. We destroyed 80% of Iran's air defense, and it's called Operation Blue Skies, and I like it because it's also the name of the Lefty X competition, and it always makes me laugh. I think it's quite suitable. We didn't finish the job. We halted the operation. And Iran now still has hundreds of ballistic missiles. And I remind you, in June, those ballistic missiles killed 29 Israelis in the war with Iran, like after all of the successes we had. So it's still a big threat. They still have a large naval fleet that can do some, it's more like a geopolitical thing. And as of now, there is negotiation with Iran. And I'm convinced there's going to be a second round of Amkelavi, of the Israel-Iran war. And the reason I'm convinced that a second round will happen is I don't see a diplomatic breakthrough. I don't see a situation where Iran and the United States and Israel are satisfied with whatever the negotiation will bring. The only case where there wouldn't be another war with Iran in the near future is a very bad case for Israel, because it means Iran got some sort of a deal Iran wanted, which means they can still exist, survive, fund terror, and secretly create a nuclear plan, because I don't see them agreeing to anything else. And I, in this case, I'm convinced the Israeli leadership understand the opportunity we have to remove this evil regime. So I'm convinced there will be another attack on Iran. I hope it's not wishful thinking, but this is how I see things. I'd also like to talk about Syria, and I'd like to give you some context about what's going on and the recent developments. So basically, Syria was used to be ruled
Maybe we
by...
can just quickly do a quick round. If anybody wants to comment on Iran, then we can do the other points. So I would just say quickly on Iran, from my understanding, yeah, Netanyahu is pretty much saying that if no deal happens, or basically Israel reserves the right to sort of like go in Iran again if they continue developing it, or Israel is still threatened. And yeah, I hope so. I hope we'll see another round. And yeah, Marco. Any quick thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's not in the next few weeks, it's going to be in the next couple of years, isn't it? Because Iran, despite what's happened, is still a few months away from producing a nuclear weapon. They haven't stopped. They never say, okay, yeah, we were wrong, we give up. No, they're just waiting for the US administration to expire. In 3 years' time, they're going to be at it again, dealing with the same people who don't have the balls to actually stand up to them. And why don't they stand up to them? We've seen how actually weak these people are. We've seen that the only reason these people, meaning these tyrants, Iran, China, Russia, are able to dictate the terms is because we let them. If we start bombing them on the head every time that they do something stupid, they would think twice. We've seen it in action. We've seen how Ukraine is slapping Putin in the chops when he was riding on the prestige of the Red Army. Everybody was afraid of Russia. Well, these people are paper tigers, and they shouldn't be allowed. We shouldn't give them the power to be the tyrants that they've been the last few decades.
And just a quick comment from me is it all hinges on when is that second round going to be? Because the longer that it is before that occurs, the more bodies like the UN provide cover for Iran to replenish its missile supplies, to try and restore the supremacy in the air across Iran, and of course to build itself up for another kind of attack, albeit a dirty bomb or something similar, which only needs to work once to have devastating effect. All of that means that it needs to be soon. I don't know whether you've got any feel, ER, as to whether we are talking soon or not. Can that be ascertained at all?
I think the current negotiation that we're given a 60-day time window, I think it will not come to diplomatic fruition.
Okay.
We have some wacko in the chat saying it is rumored Iran hit 1/3 of Israel, destroying many strategic positions. I don't think they've even hit one strategic location in Israel, at least as far as I'm aware or I remember, unless you count, which I think Iran does, killing civilians as a strategic goal, which absolutely is the goal of Iran. They were aiming and hitting cities mainly. They were not targeting military positions.
And I'd like to mention Iran have managed to hit Israeli Weizmann Institute Research Center. This is a place where Israeli scientists develop, they research ways to cure cancer and to use new medical technologies and to advance science in the world. And I think it's very poetic in a very cynical way that this is what Iran is targeting, because it's not only in this concrete level of shooting a ballistic missiles on a research institute, but also, once again, it's a part of a war of ideas. There is one side that wants to destroy science, to destroy human rights, individual rights, to bring society back to a state of barbarism and mysticism. And there is the other side who's trying to promote freedom and rights and thrive as a state where people can live freely. And this is the battle between Israel, the representative of the free world, and Iran, which is the representative of basically barbarism. So I just would like to mention that.
Iyar, would you like to bring up another point?
Yes, I'll do it briefly. So I just want to talk about Syria. So it was ruled by Assad, but basically by the Ba'ath party, which is like a communist, secular Arab party, until 2024. And it's been like this for decades. And when it was as such, it was a part of the Iranian axis to destroy Israel. But it was also, the Ba'ath ideology was like sort of uniting all the Arab-speaking people. So in a sense, the persecution against Christians and Druze was not as bad as is it now. It was mostly persecution from the communist side of the Ba'ath party. But now, since they fell after October 7th and Israel crippling Hezbollah in Iran, which led to the Assad regime to fall, it has been taken over by Abu Muhammad al-Julani, which is from like Jabhat al-Nusra, which is like a split from Al-Qaeda of all organizations. I think it's worth mentioning that al-Julani is a part of organization that split it out like the evolution of an organization splitting out from Al-Qaeda because they thought Al-Qaeda is too chill with the West. So he's now ruling Syria in practice. He's about to get moral recognition. He's already getting moral recognition from the West, but he's about to get like the Euro become like the leader of the state. And he sees it differently than the Assad regime. He is a Salafist jihadist, a Sunni Salafist jihadist. He has an alliance with Turkey and is backed by Turkey, and he's being currently armed by Turkey. The stated reason is to fight ISIS. The true reason is because of a Salafist jihadist alliance against the West and against Israel. And they see the Druze in Syria in a similar way those jihadists look at Jews. At best, it's people who are, they can pay like a special protection tax. It's called the jizya, which means they're like sub-citizens. And basically, if like, Sunni people would like to massacre Druze in Syria, so like the government will allow it and maybe support it. And that's what recently happening. Now, when you look at the Druze community in Syria, since they had it going on quite okay for them with the Assad regime, they were explicitly against Israel. But now, since the Assad regime fell, they're actually becoming allies of Israel, which is the state that also has a Druze community within it, and the state that can protect them from the Salafist jihadist state that is forming against them. And there are great tensions, and Syrians are already massacring Druze population in Syria. There has been a massacre a few months ago, over 1,000 casualties, and in the past few days there is violence again, and Israel is basically creating a security alliance with the Druze and has attacked Syria because they have attacked the Druze. And it's very interesting to see what's going on in Syria right now and where is it going. And I'd like to add another thing. This is an indication for the change after October 7th. Before October 7th, the Israeli policy was basically, we are going to take as much as we can. We're going to allow Gaza and Lebanon and Syria to act against us, to be violent against us, to try to kill us, because we don't want to escalate it to a war. It was very pragmatic point of view, and I condemn this pragmatic view. And now Israel still holds some sort of a pragmatic view, but since the circumstances have changed, since we are already at war and there is no place to de-escalation anymore, we're in a complete war against Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Hamas, all of them trying to actively destroy us. Lebanon, I mean Hezbollah, which is currently weak. So we are allowing ourselves to practice self-defense in a better way. And that's what allowed us to protect the Druze in Syria, and hopefully we'll manage to secure the rights. This is important. It has a sense of justice, and also they are potentially our allies, and this alliance is very good for Israel.
Marco, any comments on Al-Julani, Syria?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's still too early to actually decide whether, you know, he was working with al-Baghdadi, this guy, so it's not exactly a holy person. So let's judge him on what he's actually doing rather than on his past, because people can change. I don't believe somebody like that would, but you know, things can get better. I mean, there is no determinism in history, so people can choose to choose.
He's irredeemable. He's irredeemable, and he's currently doing a strategy of like trying to show the West how good he is, just so he can achieve power. And once he have the power, he would use it with Turkey to create this Salafi jihadist alliance against Israel. And don't give him this the fact that, listen, a few years ago, like I don't remember when, but he planned terror attacks against Israel, and Israel managed to stop it. And it's like no news, because when Israel stops a terrorist against a terrorist attack against it, like nothing happens. But like it's still a fact of history. Like he wants to destroy Israel. He just understands he needs to get the sanction of the world and political power. So when you judge him, take this in mind.
Sure, no, I totally get it, and that's why, you know, I'm inclined not to believe him because of what he is, what he was. So you know, I'm not illuded he's going to turn into a savior. But on the other hand, the fact that Iran is no longer there to provide the kind of support he would have provided in the past to somebody whose intention is to provide another base to attack Israel, things might be a bit different. So it might not be as successful it could have been a few years ago before the demise of Hezbollah. Well, at least the wounding of Hezbollah and the Houthis and Iran itself. So, you know, hopefully we'll be able to make sure that the power which is consolidating in Syria will not be the kind of people who then will do what we've been seeing for the last 18, 90 years. So, but yeah, I mean, pretty skeptical.
And of course, the premature promise of normalization, because that's what you want to see, is a dangerous route to take. And already we've had like the UK equivalent to the Secretary of State, David Lammy, visiting Syria, and it feels premature for such a visit, quite honestly, because that's giving legitimacy that is not earned yet to the kind of regime we're talking about. And if we're going to build up, the kind of future we need, the flourishing future that we're going to have, the route is not going to come from the likes of Al-Jalani there. It's going to come from the Western countries that already have some demonstration of independent rights as a starting point. It's not going to come from the worst element claiming overnight to have reformed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to one, I guess, quick comment on Marco's point. It's not like Israel has to either support the new regime or actively sort of oppose it, although it does oppose it to a certain way. I think Israel should absolutely engage in Syria as it did after the fall of Assad, simply destroy everything so it doesn't get to the hands of the jihadis, and continue doing this as long as if Syria poses a threat, deal with that threat.
Destroying every military equipment, just to clarify.
Yeah. With that, Yar, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Thank you for having me. Okay, so I'll start from the top. I'm an associate of the Ayn Rand Center Israel, and I encourage you to visit aynrand.org.il/about to read about Ayn Rand Center Israel in English. And I am a leading member of the Victory Now movement. We're working on a book showing a plan for Israel's victory and the moral grounding for it. And you can find us at www.victory.now. And there is also our Substack over there if you want to read our articles.
Marco, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, I want to make sure people don't get worried about the three people who resigned from the position in the UN, because they'll be able to launder their reputation somewhere else within the UN or within some other statist organization.
You're saying it like they need to launder their reputation.
Well, they need to hide behind some very well-paid position where they're going to tell you why you shouldn't fly around while they're flying around. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, the UN again goes to show what happens when you accept the premises of a collectivist Marxist thing. They produce a collectivist Marxist environment. You cannot compromise. Again, you cannot try and appease this level of evil, because all you do is just compromise your own values. You give up what you want. You give up the freedom that you want to promote by accepting an inch from these monsters. Really, all they want is just political power.
And I'll just make my final comment, just an aside on what was mentioned earlier about Iran's attack on Israel. It also attempted to attack the Israeli stock exchange, of course, isn't it? Didn't it?
Well, they did hit it.
Exactly. And that is indicative of the fact that they are, going for capitalism, going for the success, going for a country's ability to trade freely. And it's no surprise that within the UK, there was also a bunch of alleged Islamists with a plot that was stopped by the security services of attacking the UK stock exchange in the last couple of years, related to what's pro-Palestine support. And it's the same motivation there. So it's clear if you join the dots to see what's going on, and you need to be alert to it. In terms of where you can find us, the Briefly Objective, lots of material taken from many of the conversations across all sorts of subjects, including the UN. And you can find lots of short videos in the description below. It's a YouTube channel with that needs as many views and likes and support as you can show it, please. Thank you.
And with that, The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy has been the sponsor of today's reality show. You can find out more about it following the link in the chat and in the description, as well as the irreplaceable Spark Conference. Visit objectivism.co.uk to find out more about the conference we are planning later this year, October 25th, 26th, in Orange County, California, USA. So with that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.